Hello, my name is Dr. David Meek. This presentation is titled Dinner Table Syndrome, an accumulation of missed communication. For this presentation, for dinner table syndrome, I will be using the acronym DTS. What is dinner table syndrome? As you are aware, we recently finished the holidays, and some of us have experienced sitting at a table where there are conversations happening. There are also some of us who are deaf or hard of hearing who have experienced sitting at this same type of table and not being able to hear anything that is going on. You see here, different artists have their views of the dinner table syndrome. This is where everyone is involved except for the deaf or hard of hearing person. For myself, I have personally experienced this dinner table syndrome. I didn't actually realize it until a few years ago when we were discussing the dinner table syndrome in one of my doctoral classes. It really hit me at that time, and that's why I wanted to continue researching this topic and gather other views from other deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Dinner table syndrome is really a metaphor, and it does not always have to be around the dinner table. It can be in restaurants. It can occur in classrooms where other students are talking and the deaf or hard of hearing person is missing out on the conversation going on around them. This can happen at gatherings of friends and family. This can also happen in the car when a deaf or hard of hearing person is sitting in the back seat and can have difficulties communicating with someone who is sitting in the front seat. A lack of reciprocal dialogue between family members sets up a lack of incidental learning, whereas the deaf child is not able to hear or see the conversations, making this inaccessible for the deaf child. Cognitive development can be limited if conversations are obscured or missed out on completely, which can then lead to gaps in general knowledge. The earlier a child's language develops, the broader their range of mental concepts, and the more likely they will be able to learn in school. Children learn about the world by watching others and imitating others' actions. Incidental learning is the learning from experiences that are unplanned or not intentional. This can occur by overhearing speech or sounds. Hearing children can overhear approximately 90% of information in their surrounding environment. Look at the picture here of the children. They may be talking to each other, but at the same time, they may be unintentionally listening to their parents in the background talking about bills, for example. It is difficult for most deaf or hard of hearing individuals to overhear conversations. So it would need to be overseeing conversations for them to have access. There is limited access to incidental opportunities for these individuals. Some may only catch parts of the conversation and then try to fill in the gaps with what they already know about the situation. World knowledge is what one knows about the world. This information can be learned formally, maybe in school, or informally through conversations. It is developed through interaction with family, friends, and other people. We know that if there is a lack of incidental learning, then there will be a lack of world knowledge. With early access to language, one can develop world knowledge. I had 6 participants in my study, 3 of which graduated from a K-12 mainstreamed educational program, and 3 of which graduated from a K-12 school for the deaf. All participants for this study are from the southeastern portion of the United States. I provided pseudonyms to protect the participant's identity. I collected my data using a variety of platforms and held video conversations for my interviews and focus groups. The questions for the interviews and focus groups didn't follow a set specific list of questions, but more went along with those that I was interacting with so that they could share their experiences. When together at the dinner table with their families, some participants did explain that they felt the desire to escape the situation since they were not a part of the conversations. Information about what was happening in the world was often a topic of family conversation. Hearing people can hear about world knowledge from direct conversations. Most of the deaf participants were not able to catch all of what was happening in the world, which then limited their access to world knowledge. So then we were curious where they get their news from. Some participants get their news information from Facebook. Some from a daily news phone app. Some get their information from television news. But participants did complain about the closed captions seeming to be lagging or behind. Participants also mentioned the Daily Moth. This is a news program where the news is presented in a direct visual language, which is ASL. Many deaf and hard of hearing people have heard or seen these sayings on the slide more than once in their lives. All of the participants noted that they frequently or always felt left out of conversations with their families at the dinner table. Some did try to follow along and would often miss information. Often, discussions between the participants and their family would be shorter conversations. They knew that they were not expanding on their conversations when questions were asked by their hearing family members. There was just limited interaction and communication. Around the holidays, Christmas for example, Peyton and Shelby shared that their parents tended to pull them into conversations. Peyton was more involved in conversations, and Shelby had more hands-on type activities, which kept the whole family in sync with their conversations. For participant Rhea, while her mother knows ASL, she felt that her mother did not understand deaf culture fully. Participants who graduated from the School for the Deaf realized earlier on that they were missing out on conversations. While staying at the school, the participants were surrounded by ASL all day. But when they arrive home, they would often have to code switch in order to communicate with their family. They had to change the way they communicated with their family. For Rhea and Shelby, their moods changed during the bus ride home. While they still, of course, loved to be with their families, they had a sense of isolation because of the lack of communication. Those participants who were mainstreamed noticed that they missed out on individual words that were spoken during communication, and they relied on their knowledge of what was being discussed to fill in the gaps. They really experienced more after they were able to be in a deaf-centric environment. These types of comments suggest that exposure to a more accessible environment changes how these mainstream students are able to understand that what they had missed and that they had missed information when relying only on auditory input from family members. One participant, Luke, had this realization from watching television. All 6 of the participants understood that they missed out at some point in their lives. For some, this realization came earlier when they were able to be immersed within the culture of a school for the deaf. For others, this realization came later when they entered a university where there was a more deaf-centric environment. This topic of dinner table syndrome not only captured my own lived experiences, as well as these participants who grew up in hearing families. We struggled with access to communication and language. We struggled to be involved in dialogues with our families and our friends at school. We noticed problems with conversational belonging and a sense of inclusion, or rather a sense of exclusion. All of these frustrations and missed opportunities led to our realization of missing out. We desire to be a part of our family and friends' lives, but entering the hearing world, we often feel left out. Our hope is that a better understanding of our feelings and frustrations and anger can help our families develop strategies to help reduce these feelings of isolation. Again, we love our families, and we very much want for them to understand this part of who we are. It is important to remember that families often do not intentionally exclude their deaf or hard of hearing members from conversations. My goal for this research was to draw attention to the exclusion and the isolation that can occur. I know this presentation was short and sweet, so please feel free to check out my published article that is listed on this slide. There's a link here. In the article, I do go into depth and provide more details about each participant, and I also share my own experiences with dinner table syndrome. Thank you.